right? Or have I, has the time been reduced? I still have 40 minutes, right?
Yes, sir, you do have 40 minutes, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. As our host said, my name is Busoasowo Bisong. I'm a lawyer around the Busoasowo Foundation. And so, just a quick take off. I just want to read out some statistics. Then we would go into the main conversation. So I'm going to read out a few things I found that um, just to buttress the point that if parenting is not done effectively, right, it creates problems. When parenting is done effectively, right, it takes away those problems. So global research supports the fact that when parenting is done well, what we call positive parenting, parenting in a way that ought to be in the way children ought to be parented, statistics says that it lowers the rate of depression and children in children between 30 to 40%. That is to say, children who are parented well are 30 to 40% less likely to suffer depression and anxiety. They are 20 to 30% higher, right? Most likely to have high levels of self esteem. It has also been proven that children who come from homes where parenting is done right, that they are 50%, right, more likely to be actively engaged in school and 50% less likely to drop out of school. Now, for an area that I love so much, which is drug abuse prevention, children who are parented well, right, have up to 60%, they are 60% less likely to engage in drug abuse. And the most beautiful thing about these statistics is that children who are parented well have reported over 40%, those children are 40% more likely to be successful, right, during their adulthood than children who come from homes that are not parented well. And so, whether we like it or not, right, the way we parent children would not only affect the children as individuals, right, but will go ahead to affect every person who would in the future be involved in with that child, whether as co-workers, as classmates, or as spouses. So parents must understand that when they have the privilege to parent children, right, it is a trust that has been given to them in hope that the outcome of that effort will be such that society will be better because of the way they parented their children. All of the crises that we see around us today are perpetrated by human don't work right around us, right? This world is occupied by humans, but essentially the people who drive the problems we experience are people who did not fall from the sky. Came from the same thing again with people who are contributing positively to the society. They all came from home. And so the last time we had this conversation, we stated clearly that the primary responsibility of a father or of a mother, or put it contextually, of a parent is to establish for a child the values with which that child is to navigate life with. So, as a father, as a mother, your sole responsibility, the most important responsibility that you have, right, is to establish your child on the right kinds of values with which that child will in turn use those values to navigate life. Let me turn off my video. I think that is costing my network. Turn off my video. Thank you. So I was saying categorically that the paramount responsibility of any parent is to establish the children he or she has care or custody over on the right values. These values will now become the driving force, right, with which this child or that child would navigate life with. And so the difference between a child who engages in drug abuse, or the child who engages in cultism, or the child who fights in school, or the child who steals in school is essentially the value system. So there are no blurry lines between right and wrong. There are no blurry lines. And parents should not, in the way they communicate what is right and wrong to their children, should not make it appear as though the distinction between right and wrong is not very obvious. It depends on how you feel, or it depends on the circumstances. No. Right is right no matter the circumstances. Wrong is wrong no matter the circumstances. So the first responsibility that you have as a parent is to establish values. Children, right, are born with blank slate. That is to say, when a child is born, the child does not know the difference between right and wrong, does not know the difference between fire and water. It is the responsibility of the parent, right, to inculcate that knowledge. The reason you are a father is because you are expected to have the knowledge that another person can depend on your knowledge, right, and not end up poorly. I will repeat that again. The reason why you are a parent is that you have sufficient knowledge that somebody else can depend on that knowledge and not end up wrongly. So when the Bible says that parents should train a child in the way that he should grow, so that when in the way that he should go, so that when he grows, he will not depart from it. It therefore means that the parents have the accurate knowledge, right? Sufficient knowledge to model the life of a child in the way that he should go. So that responsibility is placed on your shoulder as a father or as a mother. And so whether you have that knowledge or not is a different thing. But you should know that it is expected of you to have sufficient knowledge that when your children depend on that knowledge, they will not turn out to be radicals in the society. So if you don't have that knowledge, the responsibility is on you to look for that knowledge. The responsibility is on you to find and empower and equip yourself with that knowledge. The second thing I would like to point out again is the fact that every parent, right, must recognize, I can't say this enough, as a father, as a mother, you must recognize that you are not the only influence in the life of your child. The TV screens at home, the mobile devices, the movies that they watch, the cartoons that they watch, the songs they listen to, the people that they walk around with, all of these different factors are struggling for a space in the life of your child. Your responsibility, therefore, is to provide for your child the framework and the modalities and the boundaries that that child can use to navigate all of these different influences that are struggling for a space in the child's life. So if you do not, your role as a parent is so critical that if you fail in it, right, you can be rest assured that not only will your children turn out poorly, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, and even generations after. Because until that circle is truncated, right, that is the same thing that there are families that trauma has been passed from generation to generation. Some of the things that we call as ancestral causes in Nigeria are just the byproduct of ineffective and poor parenting. So we say that it happened here. My father was angry. My mother is angry. Your grandfather is angry. Your great grandfather is angry. We say it's generational patterns. Meanwhile, it is just a product of poor parenting. Someone will need to arise within that family to say, no, we have to turn the clock backward. So you must understand that. The next thing I will say is that I said this during the last conversation. How do you then provide the values for your children? How do you then establish values for your children? I always advise that each family should have a value code, whether it is written or unwritten. A child should know that in this family, we don't lie. In this family, we don't hurt other people. In this family, we don't fight. In this family, we don't steal. Right? In this family, we are not morally bankrupt. Those values or those code, the value code that I'm talking about, whether it is written or unwritten, should be clearly communicated. It is the responsibility of the parent, right, to first of all begin to live out that value code so that their children can, by observation, also live out that value code. I will repeat that again. Now, the emphasis in that point is by observation. Children, like we all know, right, are keen observers but poor interpreters. That is to say, a child can see a father or a mother, right, doing something that is obviously wrong. The child does not have the maturity to know that what that parent or is doing is wrong. The child will just replicate it. So they observe, they replicate. But they don't know, they don't have the skill, the maturity needed because that is why they are children to be able to differentiate between right and wrong. So if you want to establish values for your children, you start by first of all, right, living out those values yourself, communicating those values, the second step, and holding them accountable for those values, the third step. And the final step, right, is celebrating them for sticking to those values. And so I will repeat those four steps again. If you are a parent and you are wondering, how do I establish values in my family? How do I build my children on values? The first is that you should live out those values yourself. The second is that you should communicate those values to your children. The third step is that you should hold them accountable to those values. And the last step is that you should celebrate them when they live out those values. For many, many parents, right, the only time they get an opportunity to instill values in their children, right, is when the children go wrong. And so the only time a child knows that um, he should not do something is after he has done it. Therefore, and thereafter, the father or the mother will now be either arguing or scolding the child. So the child only gets to hear the father or mother instill values in him or her, right, when he or she is wrong. But why do you need to wait for a child to be wrong before you begin to correct or before you begin to inform and instruct the child? You should be able to do that before the child even has an opportunity to go wrong. The last step, which I would have to emphasize again, is the need to celebrate your children when they live by the values. Now, celebrating your children is as simple as asking the child to give you a high five. If a child comes back and said, uh, Father, today in school, right, someone did something and I didn't retaliate. I told the person, I forgive you, whether or not you ask for it. Don't tell the child, so is that not what you're supposed to do? What were you expecting to do? You want to go and fight? That is very, I forgive my word, but that is very insane. You should use that moment to celebrate that child for being able to live out the values that you are instructing the child and use that moment again to reinforce those values, right? You can say something like, good, you did well, thank you, give me a high five. That is who you are. And you begin to re-emphasize that we must learn to forgive other people because they act based on what they know. And that the way people act should not cause us to abandon the values that we have, to begin to treat them in the same way that they treat us. If you do that, right, you are not only um, celebrating the child, you are also pointing the child to the fact that the reason why that person is acting that way is because that person does not know better, right? So the child is in a more advantageous position because of what the child knows to act better. So that is how you establish children on values. Now again, wow, my time has run so fast. Let me talk about social engineering for a moment. It just still boils down again from the issue of establishing values. Many parents, right, in the 21st century, unfortunately, are not equipped. Not equipped. Equipped is not the right word. Many parents are not in the know of the peculiar challenges or the peculiar circumstances that their children find themselves in. 20 years ago, raising a child was not as difficult as it was today because the child does not have to it does not have to bother. You don't have to bother that there's anything as yahoo yahoo. You don't have to bother that somebody who is a man, right, is dressing like a woman on TikTok and Instagram, right, and making money from it. You don't have to bother with the fact that somebody wakes up in the morning and tells and says that is the way he feels now, although he's a boy, he's feeling like a woman. Those conversations, right, they were so sacrilegious, right, 10 to 15 years, even 20 years ago, that they were not had. It was an impossibility. If our great grandfathers were alive today, they would utterly be shocked. They would not believe that this is the world that they once lived in. Now, children in primary school are having these conversations, are being exposed to all of these ideologies. The question I want you to answer if you're a father or a mother today is that, are you equipped enough to have a conversation with your child if an issue of cross-dressing comes up, if an issue of same-sex marriage comes up, if an issue of transgender comes up, if an issue of fraud comes up, if an issue of the fact that money is everything, if an issue of school is a scam comes up, are you able to have that conversation with your child? Or you would do like the conventional African parent and tell the child to shut up. In asking the child to shut up, right, you are pushing the child to go and find answers because the questions in the heart of children, right, whether they are still very young at the age of 7, or they are 14, or they are 18, or they are 20, or they are 21, right, if you don't provide answers, they will find answers. And the unfortunate thing about that is that wherever those answers are found, they will accept it. They will accept it. So you have to prepare yourself for those things. So I was talking about social engineering. I think that is where maybe I will begin to tie up this. Now, social engineering, let me explain what that means. Is the process through which society is defined in terms of how do you bring a society to a particular belief system? How do you establish culture? How do you establish behavioral patterns? All of those things make up for what I term as social engineering. Now, families are supposed to be at the forefront of social engineering. But these days, right, social media is at the forefront of social engineering. So for many parents, right, the haircut that your child insists that he must barb if he's a boy, right, is something he saw either a footballer is having that same haircut or a musician that child watches on television. Now, those people are becoming the tools or the models they define us, if there's any word like that, right, of what is socially acceptable. Remember, I mentioned that families are supposed to be at the forefront of social engineering. Families are supposed to establish children on values. Those values are supposed to shape the way the children act. Now, that responsibility has been left over to social media and all of the different kinds of influencers and the role models that children have. If you don't talk to your children, right, someone else will do that talking. And I guarantee you, most often than not, right, the wrong person is doing the talking. You have to know that your responsibility as the father or as the mother is not just to watch your children grow, right? It is to show them how to grow. Now, I still come back again because this is we are in a Christian circle. The instruction to parents is to train up a child in the way he should go. In the way, meaning that parenting is supposed to provide guidance, is supposed to provide direction for the present and the future realities of children. So you should know, you should have expectation of how your children should turn out. You should have those expectations. It is a crime, so to say, right? If as a parent you don't have those expectations, it is a double crime if you're a Christian and don't have those expectations. And I would say why it is a double crime for Christians, Christian parents who don't have expectations. I think I'll need to turn my video at this point. For Christian parents who don't have the expectation of what their children should turn out to be, it's a crime. It's an act of unbelief. And I will say why. God gave you those children and gave you an assignment and said, train them in the way that they should go. If you don't have a mental picture of the way that they should go, right? So how are you expecting, how do you hold God accountable, right? That you are doing your part and he should do his part. What is the mental picture that you have about your children? Are you just hoping that they will just turn out well? Are you just hoping that because you send them to school, because they are in children church, because they are in a campus fellowship, that they will turn out well, just like that? What is the mental picture? What is the vision that you have? This is not about saying that my child is going to be a lawyer. Meanwhile, the child loves music. That is not the point I'm saying. What I'm saying is that every parent should have a mental picture of what their children should look like in terms of character. What kind of daughter do you want to raise? What do you see that child becoming? Jesus, when he was there, said that he came in the volumes of books that were written. There is already a designed life. So parents should have that mental picture. You should visualize that in the future, right? Your child should be a responsible husband. So if people are complaining that women are being treated poorly, you should be so confident in your heart that you are raising a child, you are raising a boy, right, who will grow up to be a responsible man, who will treat women fairly, and that his wife, any person who marries your son, right, should be thanking God every day for your life because of the way you raised him. When you have that mental picture, it is easier to hold God accountable, right, to delivering that mental picture. Because your expectation as a parent, as a righteous person, right, which is why I said it is a double crime if a Christian parent and you don't have expectation, because those expectations will not be cautioned. Now, a mental picture, why you should have that mental picture is that it brings intentionality to your parenting, because you know the kind of future that you hope to see your children. You know with the mental picture that you have. So you are able, right, to intentionally, because of, if you are not thinking about it, many of the things that we leave to chance, right, that that now generate, right, or even deteriorate into crisis is because the activeness that is supposed to be attached to those things is not there. So even when things are happening wrongly, we cannot see. So if you have that picture, if a child is doing otherwise, you are not disciplining that child, right, to put an injury on that child. You will not be disciplining that child because you want that child to align with the future that you have in mind, the future that you have seen. So parenting must be done with a mental picture because it is an effective way to cause you to be intentional because there is something that you are looking at. Again, on social engineering, right? Your children, you must raise intelligent children who can ask questions, who can defend the things that they believe, and ultimately who are not afraid to say no. I say this very categorically that the children who most likely engage in social vices and turn out poorly are children who can't say no. Now, they can't say no, not because they don't know that they should say no, but because they don't have the capacity, the mental the mental capacity to say no. That mental capacity to say like how do you define that child can say no? It's first of all you as a parent, right? Showing that child how to say no. I say no. You should not raise children you can't say no to. I saw a beautiful picture this week. A father and a grandfather took by their child. I think she was about 2 years, about 24. I think they were trying to show, and the, the little child was insisting on getting a particular item. The child refused, the grandfather refused, then she started showing tantrums. As a matter of fact, she just on the ground and started rolling. The father and the grandfather, one of them stood behind where her legs, which as she fell down, the was only one of them stood by her leg, the other one stood by her head, and they stood there calmly without saying a word, waited for the girl to finish all of her tantrums. When she finished, she calmed down, they took her across you. Now, that child will know arguing that you can't get everything you want, right? And so parents don't teach their children how to say no, and they themselves say no, it becomes a problem. When the child questions you as to why he or she should do something, don't respond with no. You tell the child, for instance, like when children are around, if you can't do it, you say, mommy, why? The person that follows mommy is a slap. If you do that, you raise children who can question anything. So they go outside and the person tells them, this is our play, right? We smoke. The child it is not used to saying, why do you smoke? What's the benefit of smoking? He just blend in because he has known from the experiences he or she has had at home. Anytime you question something, there is a conflict. You are raised the child to know that saying no is justification. There is a consequence. And it's not supposed to be. It's not supposed to be so. So you should be able to allow your to question you and use those moments of question to reinforce the things that you have to say. And children need to learn from you that no is as a good answer as yes. I think young people that I have the opportunity to to um, to deliver interventions that, yes, right, yes is as effective answer as no. And that the definition of yes is that the request you made to me, I am able to grant it within my current circumstances. The definition of no is that I am unable to grant this request, right, because of my present circumstances. So they are not different. I tell young people that someone who cannot take no from you, right, should not be your child, because that is the foremost sign of a believer. Someone who cannot take no. So they must teach their children how to say no and be comfortable when the children say right. And the best way to do that, like I said, is to give your children the opportunity to interrogate. Don't see it as stubbornness or as see it as an opportunity to reinforce what you are saying. Someone is speaking. Okay. So in conclusion, as I begin to round, let me say again, finally, that another important aspect of parenting is that of observation. Now, this is so important that I cannot emphasize enough. Some of the most heartbreaking stories I have heard, like involving children, are not far from the fact that they had parents who were not observant. As a fact, you should know your child so much that if you come back home, it will be you find your child sitting up in a particular position. You can tell from the way the child is, whether everything is alright with the child. You can tell from the way the child is responding, from the way the child greets if something is not alright with that child. If you don't get that point, as a father, as a right, you will not get it. As a matter of fact, your child can literally under in your own house. You will be paid for adoption. You will not know. You will literally be paid for adoption. And you know why? Because you are not looking. If you do know, you will not see. So as a parent, you must intentionally observe your children, their mood, their posture, their demeanor, their idiosyncrasy. You have to know them. You have to know them. I don't think, is my voice clear now? I saw a message that the audio is breaking. Sorry, Mayowa, is it better now?
Yes, it's better.
Okay, sorry.
Yes,
I
your
think
voice is
that
better.
my video was okay. So the point I'm making is that if you are not observing your children, you will not be able to parent effectively. When things happen in the life of children, right, their first reaction is not to talk about it. They will put up an atmosphere in hope that you as the parent will take the clue and lead them on and bring them to the point where they can talk about what the problem is. Children who have had very horrible experience, when you talk to them as adults, they would say that many times they tried having the conversation. Some lead up to adulthood and we're still hoping that their parents will still ask them what happened that season of their life where everything turned around. If you are not looking, you would not see. So observe your children so that when something is wrong, even when you are not sure that something is wrong, right? You would create the atmosphere that if something is wrong, you would be on the know. Now, if a child says something, now let me say this again. If a child says something to you as a father or as a mother, right? If a child brings a complaint to you as a father or as a mother against somebody else, the first thing you should do is to believe them. I will say this again. Is your child, your own child, brings a complaint against somebody else, right? No matter the position of that person in this world, your first reaction is to believe that child. Believe it first and investigate later. Don't doubt a child when he or she makes those reports, because you would be telling the child that it is easy for that child not to be believed. So it is safer to believe the child and discover that it is a lie later and use that moment and instruct the child on the way that he or she should go than to disbelieve that child and later find out that it was true. I think that with these few points of mine, I have been able to convince us and not to confuse us that in order to raise children, parents must be able to put forward the right kinds of values before those children, and that parents must be deeply involved in the lives of their children so that they are able to notice when something is wrong. I think I will stop here and allow for the chance to take a few questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Please, can we just give a round of applause with emoji with the reaction? Can we just clap for our speaker today? Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful teaching. I was blessed. I learned a lot. I learned a lot. Like, I have a lot of tools in my arsenal right now, and I believe not just me, every other person's here learned something. So please, while waiting for questions, please, can we, like, one thing that struck you, one thing that you learned, like that stood out for you in the course of the training? Can we just call someone to just say one particular thing that stood out for you here? Please, Mrs. Mayowa, please, can you unmute to tell us one thing that stood out for you here? While we're waiting for Miss Mayowa to speak, if you have any questions, kindly send them to the chat box, or you raise your hands up with an emoji. While I'm going to read the questions we got from the registration form also. So please, Miss Mayowa, can you please unmute to tell us what stood out for you in the course of the session this evening?
Miss Oyinye, how are you? Good evening.
Fine, thank you, ma. Good evening, ma.
Okay, though I joined so late, I don't think it's up to 5 minutes I connected. But at least the later part that I heard very well, clearly, talking about we believe in our children. So that whatever the child does, we should believe in them first, even when if we will have to correct them later. So I think that part. So it's though I want our facilitator to explain better on that believing in our children. So, but at least I had that part clearly.
Okay, thank you so much, ma, for that. Okay, I believe we have one question here. So please, sir, please, would like you to buttress on the point where you mentioned we should believe in our children first before we discipline them, or whenever they make a complaint to us, we believe them first before we find out whether they are saying the truth or not. And if they're not saying the truth, disciplining them. So please, can you kindly buttress on that point, please? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. So, let me say again, like I've stated earlier, that children are born with blank slate. That is to say that they come empty, not knowing anything. So, how do children learn? Children learn by observation. So, if a child, right, observes by your own reaction as a parent, that if he or she says something, you don't believe him or her, what that means is that if something important happens to that child involving somebody else, that child cannot tell it to you. The reason that child cannot tell it to you is that that child knows that you will take side with the other person. And so he or she concludes that the matter is best kept to him or herself. We have seen children who the people who traumatize them told them to their faces that if you tell your father or mother this, they will not believe you. And true to their word, if that child would have spoken, nobody would have believed them. Now, how did that child come to a conclusion that if I tell my mother or my father this thing, they will not believe it? How do children come to that conclusion? How? It is because of antecedent. So when I say believe your children, right, first, is that if a child muster up the courage to come and confide in you, right, you should believe what that child is saying. And then you go and investigate. If you find out that the child told a lie, you call back the child, right, and correct that child. And let the child know that if he says something, you believe him or her. And that is the reason why that child should not lie to you. So that is what I mean by believing in your children. What you will achieve with that is that you will create in your children the confidence required of them. So if they go out and anything happens, they know that there is a place that they can always talk to about. They come back home to talk about it. You know, it is insane most times for me, right? It is unbelievable. That is the better word. That the things that children are supposed to be sharing with their parents, they share with outsiders. They meet you out when you go to their school or when you go to their youth group, right? And they are telling you things that they should be having that conversation with somebody at home. But they are more confident to speak to an outsider who cannot judge them than to speak to their father or mother. It's an aberration. It should never happen. So I think that's what I can say towards that.
Um, Thank you so much, sir. I can really relate to this particular explanation because I remember when I was small, and then something happened. I can't really remember the situation actually, but then I reported to my mom, and I was actually surprised. I had to just develop courage to report to my mom because the girl was literally bullying me. She was our neighbor, and she was bullying me, and then I literally fought back, and fighting back, I think I injured her. So her mom and the girl came to report to my mom. And my mom shouted at the girl. And I was so surprised. I was like, wow. Since then, whenever anybody tries to look for my trouble, I will just go and report to my mom immediately. So that thing boosted my confidence. So I totally relate to this actually. Thank you so much, sir. Okay, I'm going to read some of the questions we got from the registration form. Okay. One question we got here is what is a good way for parenting? Um, yeah, that question is sinking in. The second question we got, what is the way forward to disciplining children Some parents find it difficult to correct their children. So what is the correct way to discipline children? Hello, sir, did you hear the questions I read?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so
I
please,
all.
okay. Okay, yeah, that's the two, those are the two questions we got. And another one we got, what can you do bringing up a child and you deserve the child prefers going his and you observe the child prefers going his or her own way rather than following the ways of the parents. Okay, what can you do when bringing up a child and you observe the child prefers going his or her own way rather than following the ways of the parents? What do you do in this situation?
Oh, okay. So let me start with the let me start with the last question. A child does not have a way he's going. A child does not have a way. Any way a child is going, right? Someone is leading that way. Let me say that. Let me say that again. A child does not have a way he is going. Any way, any pattern that a child is following, right? Someone is leading that way. So if it is not the parent, somebody else is leading that way. A parent cannot say that the child is going somewhere else. No, no. It is the parent's responsibility, right, to show the child where the child is supposed to go to. So a child of 4 years, or 5 years, or 7 years, or 8 years, or 10 years should not tell the father what he or she would wear, or bag, or the haircut to buy, or the school that he or she would go to, or decide what he or she will eat in the house. Now, while we are not advocating for parents how do I call it, to militarize their homes, we are saying that children are to be shown the way to go. So if a child is moving in another direction, someone is showing that child the way to go. So it is not, it means that the parents are losing their grip over their children. So what do the parents do, right? You bring back that child to the position where that child is supposed to be, the position of listening to you. Now, there's something that I saw in the scripture. I'm still using scripture again. It says that foolishness is tied to the heart of a child. It is the rod of discipline that will take it away from it. So the parent must discipline. When we hear discipline, we think that it's about flogging. No, it is not about physical punishment. Now, whether it is about talking, right? Whether it is about setting boundaries, right? Or withdrawing privileges, or ultimately, right, physical punishment. All of these are effective tools to bring back the child to the place that he or she is supposed to be. If a child prefers to be going another way, just know that it is not the child going that way. Someone is showing that child that way. So bring back your child to the house. And of course, if you believe in God, prayer is always an effective tool. But you must insist that your child would go the way that you are showing that child, because that is what it is supposed to be. The next question, right? Let me start from the. I think I've answered the believe in your children. So, what is a good way to parent? Everything we have said here today is a good way to parent. But let me put it in context and in perspective. The best way to parent, right, is to know, or is to do what we call value-based parenting. Meaning that let the length and breadth of everything you do with your children be based on values. Now, if you believe in God, the Bible becomes the template for your values. So everything you do, right, let it be based on values. So when you are insisting that a child does a thing a particular way, right, the authority you are standing on is on the value system. When you fall short of the value system, right, you would undergo the same process that the child should undergo if you fall short. So there are families who implement this very well. Parents who say that you don't shout, you don't display anger, right? When they fall short of that, I have seen parents who call their children together and apologize to their children for acting in a particular way or for acting in anger, because ahead of time or previously they have told their children that it is not part of our value system to act in anger. When parents fall short of those things and they own up and take responsibility, they don't know that outside of them taking responsibility, they are showing their children how committed they are to those values. Their children, therefore, would most likely, right, follow after that pattern. So that is value-based parenting, and every other thing here that we have said is a good way to parent. But I want to emphasize again the part of knowing your children. I don't know. I cannot emphasize it enough. You must know your child. You must know your child. There is a way you will know your child, that you can sense when something is wrong, even if that child is 200,000 meters away from you. What is the correct way to discipline? The correct way to discipline, right, is to reinforce values. And I will put that in perspective. So if a child does something that is wrong and you want to punish the child, right, don't punish the child as though you are in a wrestling, you are fighting with a bandit. And you don't do that in anger. I have not seen, maybe you guys have seen, I have not seen a father or a mother who punishes a child in anger and does it right. If you don't wound that child, you will say what you are not supposed to say. If you don't say what you're not supposed to say, you will then see, right, the degree of what you are supposed to do. Every time you punish or discipline a child in anger, you will exceed your boundaries. You will exceed your boundaries. The best way to correct a child is always to be in charge of your emotions as a father or as a mother. And so that when you are doing that, your eyes is clear. You will know that he's a child that you don't want to kill the child. And then you must always explain, especially when they are still very young, you must always explain why they are receiving the punishment. When you have given that punishment, right, always find a unifying opportunity to bring back that child to you. Discipline should not be like an outcast system. It shouldn't be like an outcast system. When you discipline a child and you let that child go and be telling the child, this is why I prefer your brother. There are things that parents say, I just know that if care is not taken, right, we will meet in court when the parents have died and we'll be trying to help the children share their properties. I was in court one day and I saw the saddest side of my practice as a lawyer, outside of the sentencing I witnessed when I first became a lawyer. A mother has not died, right? She's still alive. The children are fighting over her property already. She was compelled to go and make a will, right? The children, she is not near death. She is not near death yet, not near death, and yet they were already fighting over her property. It's a sad thing. It's a very sad thing. So some of those things are a product of comparison with choosing favorite children. Parents who always say that they have favorite children. The children you brought into this world, you choose which one is your favorite. So what do you want the other children to do? Which favorite would they be? So you put them at a point of always wanting to get to a point where they will receive that recognition as a favorite, and it will never happen. So what would they do next? They begin to fight the favorite. And that is why sibling rivalry would try from childhood down into adulthood. I think that I have done justice to that. Except if there's any other question, I will meet it. Thank you.
Um, Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. Do we have any other questions? Do anyone has any more questions? Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this section this evening. I believe we've all learned one or two things, and even if we joined late, at least from the questions that we are asked, we're able to pick up one or two ways we can help build the right foundation for our children. The fundamental foundational one is living a training our children based on value, building the right values for our children. And as a Christian, the Word of God, the Bible sets the right value systems for us. So I believe we've all learned one or two things today. This particular intentional parenting series is a series that goes on every month. uh, will communicate more on when the next session will be holding via our social media handles. So kindly do well to follow us on our social media handles. It's Jedidiah Cares on all social media platforms. And the recording of this video will be uploaded on YouTube and the link made accessible. So please, if you did not register through the link, because I can see some persons here that were not registered. If you did not register, kindly drop your name on the chat box and your email, your name, your email, and your phone number, so we can add you to our register of attendance for this meeting today. Thank you so much once again to the facilitator. Thank you so much, sir, for your time and your devotion today. Thank you so much, everyone. To bring this meeting to an end, we'll be calling on Mrs. Mayowa to say the closing prayer for us, please.